let's do a Q&A session about stats. So we're going to do a Q&A about equipment in a little while, but let's talk a little bit about stats, because I see people still have a lot of questions about stats. And if you have any burning questions about how you should approach your stats, how certain stats work, do certain stats apply to healers, etc., then now is your time to ask. Because I always like in these streams to consolidate all the questions of a similar topic together, so that people who are interested in that topic can ask all the questions at the same time and maybe help someone else. So Viso says, why accuracy? Well, that's a bigger question than the 2 words that you've typed. But accuracy is a very important stat, as most people should know by now. It basically offsets the chance of your attacks not hitting enemies. And the way you can tell how much accuracy you need is by going to the boss that you're fighting and pressing the more info, the plus sign here, and then you can see your actual accuracy listed here. So as you can see, I'm like 103.67%, and that results to 97.67 actual accuracy. Now, one thing that you have to keep in mind is, starting, I believe, I don't know when exactly it starts, but certainly in Class Change 2, you'll see here that the actual percentage of accuracy that you get from the numerical amount of accuracy you have is going to decrease after you reach these level thresholds. So between level 40 and level 80 Nightweaver, this is the correlation here. 2237 accuracy is to 23.67% accuracy. But once we reach level 81 Nightweaver, this 2237 might only give 18% accuracy from that point on. So that's something to keep in mind, that accuracy, the diminishing returns of accuracy, is going to get worse every time you pass this level threshold here. Alvin says, what's the ideal block rate for tanks? What stats do you go for after you get the ideal block rate? So the ideal block rate for most tanks is going to be between, usually you're going to aim for about 50%, and in some rare cases up to 60%. But as long as you can get to 50%, you're in good shape. Now, keep in mind, as a tank, you have additional percentage, a flat percentage source from your passive skills. So you're going to really need, with that included, it should be relatively straightforward to hit that 50% block. And this is going to be even more important in Class Change 1, I believe, as well in Class Change 2, because you have some mechanics that actually scale off your block, and your damage is actually going to increase off your block as well because of the certain tactical skills you have, passive skills that you have. So 50 to 60%, but ideally 50%, Alvin, for your tank block rate. And after you max your block rate, if you're looking for what better stats to run after that as a tank, then you would start going towards endurance, evasion, tenacity, and move on from there. Chris says, for my tank build, should I build my crit dead and haste, or should I focus more on def, tenacity, and endurance? So Chris, you should still get a certain amount of crit determination and haste, but you would simply not invest into them to the same extent that a DPS focused sword master would. So instead of going for like 40, 45, 50% crit determination, you would stick instead to probably around 30%, 35%, something like that. And haste as well. If you can get to 30%, it's great, but you would not do so at the expense of your defensive stat. What's the best endurance for a CC2 tank? Capped. If you can cap it, that's perfect. Okami says, I don't like how accuracy nosedives every few specific levels. I agree, it's very frustrating. Goni says, what's the order of importance for stats for a Darkblade? So Darkblade is a little bit unique compared to other classes in that because Crimson Ring has a 100% chance to crit, you would actually get away with having up to like 10% more determination than your crit. But other than that, it would follow the same stat priority as any other class. So you can have up to 10% more determination than your crit, and then a normal amount of haste, mastery, accuracy, again, to get to your actual accuracy of 100%, whether that's 103% or 106% or a flat 100%. Haste, probably less important than mastery for a Darkblade, and of course crit damage is very important as well, because Darkblade is all about getting very, very big Crimson Ring hits. So haste is good for getting more stacks, to get a 33 stacks before your next Crimson Ring, but mastery and crit damage all add up a lot. Let's see. Neil says, I'm having a hard time managing my stats. When's the time you should start increasing mastery, and from where is best? So Neil, generally speaking, you should try to, once you have your crit and determination balanced to a nice level and the accuracy you need, then if your class needs haste, you would prioritize haste, and then after that point, you would go for mastery. Now, so yeah, I mean, it's there. It's more important than attack. So your order priority should be crit, determination, accuracy, followed by haste, mastery, followed by attack. And crit damage, of course, is also going to be important. But crit damage, I think, is a given, because if you run a DPS, you're always going to run triple crit damage moves in your offensive move slot. Can ask, is HP or defense better for tanks? Defensive tanks? Both. Both are good. Defense is good though because you have abilities that increase your defense by a percentage, so the more defense you have, the more that'll impact. Can you tell us what the stat caps are at what percentage? Sure, Carter. So the stat caps depend on the stats. So for offensive stats, crit, determination, haste, and mastery, you have a cap. So just to confirm, when we talk about a cap, we're talking about a cap on the maximum number of percentage you can get from the numerical value of that stat. So for those who don't know, there is a hard cap. Some people talk about a soft cap, but there is in fact a hard cap on the conversion of a numerical value of a stat to a percentage. And for class change 2, that is 50%. Now for future class changes, it actually does increase. I believe for class change 3, it's going to be 60% if I'm not mistaken. But for class change 2, that is 50%. And so as you can see here, if you look at my various stats, you will see I haven't actually capped any of them. But if I were to increase my determination here, I'm 49.56%. If I went from 5659 to 6000 determination, I actually would only get 0.44% determination, and the rest would be wasted. So crit, haste, determination, accuracy, mastery is 50%. Tenacity, the cap is 50%. Block, I'm not 100% sure because I've never capped it out, but I assume as well it's going to be 50%. Now, endurance and evasion actually have their own unique caps, which is interesting. The cap for endurance is, as you see here, 25%. For class change 2, this is the cap. So if you have over 25, if you have more endurance than what you need to get 25%, it's going to be overcapped. Now, I am way overcapped on endurance myself. 6,400 points in endurance, this should be like 50%. But I'm capped to 25%. That's because a lot of the offensive moves that I use have a second stat as endurance. So that's a bit of a waste, but so be it. Evasion as well, as you can see here, has a independent and unique hard cap of 33%. So this is the max cap for evasion, 33%. Any more numerical value in evasion is not going to increase me past 33%. So that's how that works. That's how that works. And it's an important question to understand because very often if you look at people's builds, you'll see them have far more numerical value of a stat than they can actually get percentage from it. So that's a very important optimization to understand, so you're not way overcapping on a stat that you're actually not getting any benefit from. And it's tricky, and I have to warn you, it's tricky because you will still get a combat power increase. You will still get a combat power increase even if it no longer contributes to your actual percentage. So if you're hard capped on endurance at 50% and you add, on your determination, and you continue to add determination, it'll continue to increase your combat power, but you won't actually get any more effect from it. So you have to be very careful. It's the same cap for all jobs, but for all classes, but the cap goes up with each class change. So that's how that works. And this is a very important principle to understand. So Borio says, I just recently got class change 2 and I'm quite low in determination due to the new accessory. Should I sacrifice moves to reach 40% crit and determination or 30% crit determination crit damage? I'm a healer by the way. So Borio, right off the bat, if you're talking about a healer, your heals do not increase from having crit damage. Crit damage does not affect healing up. Crit damage only affects damage up. So if you're looking at increasing your healing build, you shouldn't be having any crit damage at all. And you would run in your offensive slots whatever your build needs, whether that's determination or mastery or haste or crit, etc. Now, if you're talking about your DPS build, in theory, you could swap in 3 crit damage to the main slot. Now, is it worth, as a DPS, as a general question, is it worth as a DPS to sacrifice your crit damage slots to get a bit more determination, haste, mastery, crit? No, I don't think it's worth it. So I would not recommend doing that. Does that answer your question? Khan says, what's the cap for tenacity and evasion? Oh, we just went over this, but evasion is capped at 33% and tenacity is capped at 50%. Endurance is capped at 25%, and then the rest is also 50%. How much of a difference would mastery have for a healer? I know it's bonus healing, but does it difference at all? Yes. So zone mastery is an extremely important stat for healing, because if you click on it, you'll see here the percentage bonus when dealing damage and providing healing. So for those who don't 100% know how mastery actually works, it is a very important stat for both healing and DPS. The reason is because it is a post-calculation percentage increase. What that means is, if you have a damage formula and after the entire calculation it gives you 1,000 damage or 1,000 healing, if you have 50% mastery, that 1,000 is going to turn to 1,500. So it is a percentage increase on the final damage number, which is a very powerful, very powerful stat to have. So that it's basically view this as final damage. In many other games, mastery would be explained as final damage or final healing, I suppose. So that's how you view it. If you've played many RPGs and never seen a final damage stat, that's what mastery is. So yeah, very important for healing and very important for DPS. Tan says, what's the difference between attack speed and haste? So attack speed and haste are connected to each other in the sense that as you increase your haste, you're also going to increase your attack speed. But what attack speed is it basically affects the speed of basic attacks and active skills. So the more attack speed you have, the more basic attacks you're going to have, and you're going to also have faster animations for your tactical skill, your active skills. Now, haste, as you can see here, has a lot more effect. It increases your cast speed, recite speed, channel speed, etc. So as you increase your haste, it has an impact on your attack speed. So more haste equals more attack speed, but attack speed specifically on its own is just the cast speed of basic attacks and active skill. Yeah, no spamming, X-Men. Vsol says the first stats of DPS are number 1 crit damage, number 2 crit and determination, haste and mastery follow. And yeah, that's usually, I mean, but it's more important actually to balance your crit and determination, but you would never sacrifice your crit damage slots in order to achieve that. That's basic. Nicola asks, what does attack do? Why do I have high attack but my colleague but lower damage? So in general, attack is basically the base value, like it says, the base value for increasing your basic attacks, damaging skills, and healing skill strength. So if you imagine how the damage calculation works, everything is going to scale off your attack. Here, look at this shadow form, for example. Drive the blades to attack, dealing fire damage equal to 528% of your attack plus 560. So all of your skills scale off of attack. If you click on anything that's a damaging skill here, you'll see here, deal fire damage equal to 168% of your attack. So that's how it works. And if you look at heals as well will say heal for X amount of percentage based on attack. Now, you would never prioritize attack over the other offensive stats as a generalization. So you would still prioritize your crit, determination, accuracy, haste, and mastery, and crit damage before you start adding attack to your build. Generally speaking, you're going to get attack passively as you like gear up and basically progress through all the different places. Melamon will give you some attack, Cat Buns will give you some attack, etc. That's how you look. But that's why sometimes if you have high attack but lower of the rest of the stats, you'll actually deal less damage than someone who has less attack than you, but more of these additional stats. Borio says, regarding DPS, is it better to have crit damage rather than focusing on lucky crit? So Borio, they're sort of mutually exclusive. They're separate topics basically, and you would always have triple crit damage in your offensive slots as a DPS. There's just no better option than that. So rather than to say you should focus on lucky crit over crit damage, you would not prioritize chasing crit and determination in your 3 offensive slots in exchange for removing one of your crit damage. So no, you would not do that. Mosaic says, I see a lot of people neglecting accuracy and then wondering why damage is low. Yeah, I covered that earlier, and part of the reason is because of the fact that they're caught off guard by this diminishing returns as you reach certain level gaps. They don't realize that their accuracy has actually gone down because they reached a certain level, and they have to actually get more accuracy to do the same. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good rundown of stats. I'm actually impressed how many questions we were able to extract out of that. I see some more questions coming in, so let me answer them quickly before we transition to the next topics here. How do you achieve 40% crit and determination when you have crit damage in your attack slot? So Miguel, that's going to become easier. That's going to become easier as you progress through the game. At the beginning of the game, it might not be possible for you to do that. And you should never view crit and determination as I have to reach X number. It's not like everyone says you must reach exactly this crit and determination. The general rule of thumb is you want to achieve a balance between your crit and determination and not going to have like 50% crit and then 30% determination. That's way more important than reaching a specific number of crit and determination. DT says, would I choose 49.9% haste and 37 mastery, or 59 haste and 25 mastery? Yeah, 54.3 crit det. So DT, as an eagle eye, as an eagle, I'd probably choose... Boy, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. To be honest, DT, I don't have a good answer. The only thing I can suggest is try both builds and see which gives you more DPS. So, like, having higher haste is definitely going to help you, but that's a lot of mastery to sacrifice in order to achieve that. So, I think that the loss of mastery is not worth the extra haste. But you'd have to test yourself to see if it's an increase. Without seeing it in action, I can't say.